plague spread quickly eastward and devastated the population of Sylvania. Corpses remained where they perished, as those still living were too terrified to go near them. Although the scholars of the empire still debate it, this plague was in fact a machination of the vile ratmen who chose to decimate the population of the empire before launching a massive invasion in 1115 of the imperial calendar. The so-called Skaven Wars went on for another 9 years or so in the wider empire, until Count Mandred's Skaven Slayer was elected emperor. In Sylvania, the Skaven were driven back long before this. On the fateful Geheimnisnacht in that same year of 1111, when Morslib shone with terrible emerald witchlight, and a hail of incandescent meteors rained down on Sylvania, astrologers and soothsayers prophesied catastrophe. This starfall was indeed a sign of ill omen, for the Skaven at least. Rotting corpses marked with black blotches of the plague refused to stay in their graves. Dead fathers came back to claim their children. Rotting wives returned to lie with their husbands. Even the degenerate ghouls fled from overflowing cemeteries and charnel houses, whose inhabitants would not stay at peace. At that time, Baron Frederick van Hal ruled Sylvania. He had come to power in 1106 of the imperial calendar, and had immediately set about rooting out the corruption within the province authorities that had been so endemic since the notorious Boris Goldgather ascended to the imperial throne a few years before. With the coming of the plague and the sudden waking of the dead, everything changed for Van Hal. Just when things seemed too intolerable, a pale nobleman arrived at the gates of Van Handelsschloss. The nobleman called himself Prince Vladimir, and he offered the desperate baron a way to both control the undead rampaging across his province and drive away the Skaven. He told the legacy of Caden, a man of great power whose memory is shrouded in myth and fear. For Caden was in possession of ancient items of power that could turn the tide for Van Hal, or so Prince Vladimir claimed. Vladimir revealed that he had brought these artifacts to Van Hal, though he gave no reason as to why he would be so generous. In fact, they were the 9 books of Nagash. Van Hal had only heard of Nagash from various legends concerning Sigmar, but was curious to know what the books could teach him. With the help of Prince Vladimir, Van Hal used knowledge gleaned from the books to take control of the horde's wandering dead that plagued the Sylvanian countryside. In the absence of enough mortal soldiers, Van Hal turned the undead against the Skaven that were in process of overrunning the province, as they were doing with the rest of the empire. Though disturbed by the power revealed to him, Van Hal was delighted that the chaotic enemies had finally been driven back at minimal cost to the lives of his people. Whenever his army of zombies had been struck down, he simply resurrected them to continue the fight. Whatever the rights or wrongs of it, Van Hal is Van Hal, and then combining into one word Van Hal, as he became known to later generations, soon became the most infamous necromancer in imperial history. It was he, with the uncelebrated help of Vladimir, who wrote the infamous Liber Mortis, his masterpiece, adapted initially from Caden's translation of the 9 books of Nagash. Yet not content with this flawed translation of the great necromancer's work, Van Hal made many pilgrimages to the kingdom of the dead. Protected by his ever-present ally Vladimir and the most potent of sorceries, he communed with the inhabitants of certain tomb cities and probed the darkest secrets of ancient times. He consulted with howling demons on Geheimnisnacht and shifted nuggets of truth from their lies. For even the demons of chaos remembered Nagash's infamous deeds. It is to the Liber Mortis that the old world owes its partial knowledge of the history of the great necromancer and the ancient land he once ruled and destroyed. All across Sylvania, the Skaven and the undead expended their strength in a long and futile war that was eventually to cause the downfall of both. Van Hal was assassinated by his ambitious apprentice Lothar von Deal, who was himself driven out of Van Handelsschloss by a band of knights apparently led by his master's ghost. After von Deal's disappearance, lacking a guiding intelligence, the undead armies wandered the land aimlessly, slaughtering the living, but being destroyed piecemeal by their human Skaven and orc opponents. It took many years for the Empire to recover from the ravages of the Black Plague. Sylvania never really did, at least by mortal measures. The population was reduced to 1/10 of what it had once been, and the incidence of mutation and disease was many times greater than anywhere else in the Empire. In addition, forever after the Great Plague, the dead of Sylvania showed a tendency not to stay buried. The problem accounts for the infamous Sylvanian custom of burying corpses face down in their coffins, so that they try and dig their way out. As they try and dig their way out, they burrow downward. Of the mysterious Prince Vladimir, there are no records concerning his fate in the immediate aftermath of the Skaven Wars. So, in case you're not able to put two and two together, the mysterious Prince Vladimir is Vlad von Karstein. Vlad, before his going to assist Frederick von Hal, had actually lived in Kislev, and then during the Skaven War crisis, he actually arrived in Sylvania for the first time, or at least as far as our records indicate, for the first time, and assisted the fight against the Skaven. And you may also notice that an important aspect of that story was that Van Hal was not evil, at least not at first. Initially, he only used the dead in order to protect the living. He was not your typical crazy... He's not like Heinrich Himmler. Heinrich Himmler has always been evil and has always been a piece of shit. He's never been a good person. Can you see the book cover? Yeah, I don't know if it's going to show up due to my oh yeah, well, you can see it's not quite showing up 100%. But this is the Liber Necris, which is a very, very fun book. It has a lot of really cool undead lore. It's purely focused on undead lore, and it originates from 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy, or 6th or 7th, I think 6th. Most of the information is still relevant to modern Warhammer Fantasy. But looking at modern texts on Van Hal, we don't have nearly as much information, but we can talk a little bit about it. So, Van Hal's legacy. In 1111 of the Imperial calendar, the dead first walked in the Empire. Corpses marked with the black blotches of plague shambled about the land, needing only a will to guide them. They found it in the form of Baron Frederick Van Hal, later known as Van Hal or Van Hel. After conquering the land that eventually became Sylvania, he built his keep at Van Handelsschloss. During the time of the Black Death, the Empire suffered at the hands of the Skaven, and only the expansion of Van Hal's necromantic domain halted the Ratman's advance. The Skaven and the Undead fought a long and futile war that only ended when Van Hal was assassinated by his apprentice, Lothar von Deal. The Skaven, however, were left in a weakened state, allowing the future Emperor, Mandred Skavenslayer, to drive them from the land. Later generations of the Van Hal line took up the oath of the Witch Hunter in an attempt to atone for the sins of their heretical ancestor. So that's the most recent piece of literature. Now, you may note, if you read the Black Library novels, unfortunately, Black Library, their books are very fun and they're very enjoyable, but you can't, very unfortunately, you cannot take all of their lore at face value, because a lot of the time the lore writers will often make significant changes to the lore that cause a lot of various issues, which is not great. So for instance, a good example of this is that in the lore, undoubtedly, Baron Frederick Van Hal is who becomes Van Hel. And he was a very big, and he ruled Sylvania. However, if you read the Black Plague trilogy, Frederick Van Hal is not a baron. In the trilogy, he is actually a priest of Mor, and as a priest of Mor, basically they rearrange his story a little bit so that instead of it being that he is a baron of Sylvania and he kind of gets Sylvania under his control, and he's working really hard to eliminate the corruption caused by Emperor Boris Goldgather at the time, because Emperor Boris was a bastard. Like, Emperor Boris was literally the worst. He was one of the worst emperors the Empire's ever had. So Frederick was like amazing and was doing a lot to fix Sylvania, and to get rid of a lot of the corruptive influences of the Emperor in Sylvania. And then when the undead started popping up everywhere and all the Skaven started popping up everywhere, you know, he was like, oh shit, we're screwed. And that's when Vlad von Karstein shows up and basically is like, hey, how about instead of you just dying, I teach you about this guy named Caden, who was a really powerful sorcerer, and I can see you have the gift of sorcery, even if you've never tapped into it properly. And I can teach you how to control the dead so you can protect your people. And Van Hal was like, okay, this seems really heretical, but it's either this or nothing. It's either this or death. So he buddies up with Vlad. In the Black Plague trilogy, Van Hal is still a noble character, but it's a different kind. It's more of a personal tragedy and less of a tragedy of a good. He's still a good man, but it's more about his personal corruption due to his own moral failings and less about him paving the road to hell with good intentions. But it does still have a lot of really good lore about his descent into necromancy and what he becomes as a necromancer. The biggest things being that Van Handelslosh is a really fucking scary place. The Fortress of Van Hal is not just any fortress. What it actually is Van Hal's recreation of his personal recreation of Nagash's Black Pyramid. So he basically builds a fortress using very magically charged materials that allows it to act as an arcane fulcrum. So it draws in the winds of magic and builds up the winds of magic and allows him to greatly empower his own necromancy. And the other most important thing to note about Van Hal is there are a couple of notable truths that are really great about him. The first is that Van Hal does in fact deal a significant amount of damage to the Skaven. More is zero tolerance policy with necromancy. More would rather you do like anything else than commit necromancy. It does not matter how noble your reason for necromancy is. That is like the greatest form of sin. Like your soul has been marked eternally. You are not, that is not allowed. So in any event, Van Hal, the big thing with Van Hal is that worth noting about him is he fights this giant war with the Skaven, and he actually ends up wiping out one of the Council of 13 clans. So an entire clan of the Council of 13, one of the most powerful, groups of Skaven in existence, one of the 12 most powerful clans, gets completely exterminated in their war with Van Hal. Due to a really, really powerful event, which basically this big Skaven clan, who was notable for that they like to feast on the bones of the dead, they like to feed on corpses, and they would even dress themselves up in a very macabre style, so they would wear like skull helms and bones all over their bodies and stuff. So they were very like scary looking Skaven, and a lot of other Skaven were very scared of them. They were a very powerful clan at the time. They went full to war with Van Hal and finally went after his fortress at Van Handelslosh to wipe him out once and for all. But the Skaven did not realize two things. A, how fucking powerful Van Hal was, and second, how much magic he had generated into Van Handelslosh. So what Van Hal did to give you an idea of how fucking scary Van Hal is as a necromancer, Van Hal used all of the magic he had gathered into his fortress, the very stones of his fortress, to cast a ritual that was so powerful that in the immediate vicinity of Van Handelsschloss, Van Hal made time speed up. So he basically used his necromancy and his sorcery to create essentially like a pocket around his fortress where he vastly moved time forward to basically change the position of Morsalib so that it was Morsalib had covered the true moon. So the true moon of Manslib was being blocked by Morslib, and Morslib was going to be like radiating out magical power. And using that increase in power, he then resurrected an entire army of zombie dragons from the dragon graveyard over the World's Edge Mountains. If I recall correctly, I believe he resurrected 20 zombie dragons simultaneously. So all these zombie dragons wake up from the dragon graveyard, come flying over the World's Edge Mountains, and just obliterate the fuck out of the Skaven. Like, they get completely massacred. But a crucial element of this story is that took everything Van Hal possibly had. Ultimately, it left him so weakened and so debilitated that like he was kind of starting to fall apart a bit. And while that was all happening, his apprentice Lothar von Deal put everything into action that would lead to Van Hal's death, where he got a bunch of people to join up to fight against Van Hal, and there was a big fight known as the Battle of Felwold, where Van Hal is defeated by the forces of the Empire. And during that, that allows Lothar von Deal to do his big moment where, according to the original story, Lothar von Deal manages to get his hands on the Fellblade of all fucking things, which it's certainly possible. So according to the story, the only story we have on the subject, Lothar von Deal kills Van Hal with the Fellblade, which the Fellblade is one of the most powerful weapons in the world. It's in like the top 5. It was used to kill Nagash, so it's also used to kill Van Hal. But Van Hal dies rather hilariously, because instead of dying with his last bit of magic and power, he curses Lothar von Deal, and basically says to him that when you die, I will possess your body. And he hits him with this really nasty curse. So Lothar von Deal is basically hit with this curse that leads to him eventually dying, and Van Hal supposedly possesses his body. But we never see Van Hal again after that. So presumably either he just kind of like got his revenge on Von Deal and then he faded into history and never appeared again. Or he took over Von Deal's body, and who knows, maybe he's still hiding somewhere out there in the world. Roy Walkett, you are my new knight, good sir. What would you like your knight's name to be?
Tor.
Where is he? Curious.
Malchus.
So you need to type out a first name and then select a last name. Is he retired? Maybe. Presumably he just died. At some point. Could you control more dragons than 20? Hypothetically, but it would be extremely fucking hard. Controlling one zombie dragon is the absolute pinnacle of necromancy. It's considered the absolute pinnacle of necromancy, is controlling a single zombie dragon. And there are very, very, very powerful necromancers and vampires who cannot do that. But there you go. There's your lore story on Baron Frederick von Hal. Guardsman 14, Lally 57. Good to see you. Welcome to the stream. Hope you're having a good one. What do we know about Manfred's early pre-vampire life? Was he always a nasty boy, or did he used to be all right? If I recall, so what we know for sure about him is that we know for a fact that Manfred von Karstein was either a slave or was just he was like a street urchin. He was like the poorest of the poor, and he lived in Nehekara. So Vlad met him when he was Vashanesh, the vampire. So he was Vashanesh, last of the true vampires, last to be turned of the original vampires, and husband to Neferata. And we don't know exactly where he met Manfred, but it's likely that he met Manfred either in the city of Lamia, or he met him in a nearby city. But Manfred was basically like an extremely poor, pathetic little child on the streets that did not really have a future. And there was something about him that Vlad took an interest in him and basically took him under his wing. And Vlad raised him as a son. And then once he was of the appropriate age and strength, he gave him the blood kiss and turned him into a vampire. And we know that Manfred is the oldest of Vlad's get. He is the oldest of those that Vlad gave the blood kiss to. And he was also Vlad's favorite until Vlad met Isabella, who he, fell in love with. They're not blood related? No. There are very, very few vampires that are actually related by blood. No, Manfred is not actually... Vlad does not have any actual children. All of his children are children in darkness, which means they are those that he gave the blood kiss to. But so Manfred was not bald when Vlad turned him. Manfred did not turn bald until after Vlad had already died. But no, Manfred had a hunger to him. He had a drive and a predatory nature to him. That was the reason Vlad was so interested in him in the first place. Vlad knew what Manfred was. The moment he laid eyes on Manfred, he knew that Manfred was something special, something different. And that's why he turned him in the first place. This would, of course, eventually lead to bite him in the butt, or come down to bite him in the butt. But anyway. All right, so we haven't heard a response from the guy who won the first time, so I'm going to re-roll. Kitsune! Hey, that's awesome. Awesome, because I know you actually really wanted the character. Kitsune Adventures! You are my newest knight, my purgator. What is thy name? Vlad is an excellent judge of character. I mean, Vlad did create the most powerful necromancer there would ever be. Ulpinus, is that an available last name?
Tidy, Van, Vaughn, Vortimer, Zabez.
Sadly not. Kitsune, I know you were here earlier. Did you leave? Oh, that's gonna be super sad if Kitsune already left. Kitsune! Going once. Going twice. Oh, bummer. Well, if they're ever around, I'll give them the next one that they're here for. The one and only Sass. The one and only Sass, are you here? Or Sasse? Sashay? The one and only Sashay, Sash. One of those. Going once. Going twice. Nope. Noah Buds. Is Noah Buds here? Noah Buds. Going once. Going twice. Damn, dude. Where is everybody? Tech Priest Toast. Is Tech Priest Toast in the building? Going once. Going twice. Oh, my sweet Jesus. Savasfiger. Savas, you here? Savas. Oh, thank God. All right, Savas, what is your character name? Vayer, good to see you, dude. Yes, Vlad did turn Conrad. Yes. Vlad, Conrad von Karstein, Manfred von Karstein, and Isabella von Karstein were all turned by Vlad von Karstein. Davis? Okay. What do you want your last name to be? If you don't care, I'll just pick a random one. Davidson is sadly not an option. As remarkable as that would be.
Zaber,
Unleash me.
praise the Emperor.
I am here to serve.
Here.
The Emperor lights our path.
Unleash me.
Unleash me. Unleash me.
At your service. Yes, Commander.
Count to 5 for the last name.
The Dantel hold our husk.
Davis Bosk. What are you good at,
We are
Davis?
yours to command, brother.
You have Sanctified Kill Zone. Oh, I could retrain you? Interesting. But honestly, your setup does not seem bad. Oh, it costs requisition though. Yeah, fuck that. So what do you have? You've got +2 willpower, Sanctified Kill Zone. We can warp charge it to break armor. Deplete all ammo. Target a knight at range who gains +1 damage for every 2 ammo spent for their next ranged attack. So we want... Okay, so you need to be wielding something that has a lot of ammunition in it. What has the most ammunition? I think it's the Psy cannon, right? Or no, the silencer, I think. Yeah. Okay, so you're gonna be our silencer boy. And we're gonna reassign... We're gonna reassign
Solo.
Is it Jorge or is it George? Mr. Solar. We're gonna change your weapon. Instead of a silencer, I'm gonna give you a Psy cannon. We're gonna give you a big boy gun. Alright. I think we've done everything. It's time for a new mission. Let's boogie! Do I think Be'lakor could ever have actually succeeded in his quest for godhood? Oh, no, absolutely. Dag771, I 100% believe he could have pulled it off. Under the right circumstances. You have to remember that the Chaos Gods, as much as the Chaos Gods love to think to